this episode of the Growth Catalyst podcast, I speak with Debra Corey. Debra's background is she divides into three components: US HR foundations, and then she moved to the UK, and she explains how that move happened, into a UK rebel phase, challenging the norms. And now she's in the pay it forward phase. In fact, as an example of this, Debra is away to Ethiopia in a couple of weeks on charity work, using her HR knowledge and expertise to train and support HR professionals in Ethiopia. There's a link here somewhere should you want to donate. Whilst talking to Debra, she reiterated that the focus on employee experience and engagement is absolutely business critical. It's not optional, and leaders should remain and carry on being curious and actually speaking to people. She warns that employee engagement is down globally, and has just continued to decline in recent years. So just doing the same old stuff around retention just isn't working anymore. People really do need to understand their purpose, their clarity, and how they contribute to the business. Debra argues that every business leader has significant impact on the humans around them. Has anybody heard of the Iceberg of Ignorance? Debra shares some quick wins. She reminds us that the human factor in HR is still really important. She's written a whole clutch of books. Go and have a look at the knowledge that she's gathered and shared. I hope you enjoy.
In this episode, I'm joined by Debra Corey, who is a podcast host herself, an author of multiple books, such as Appreciate It and the Rebel Playbook, and just to name a couple. And Debra, you're a people thought leader. And in today's episode, we're going to focus in on the employee experience and why it's so important. But first of all, thank you very much for joining me today.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it.
So could you give us a brief introduction of you and your background, please?
Sure. So I have been working for quite a few years. So probably to condense it, I usually put it into three categories. So the first category was really my foundational part of my career when I was just starting out in HR. And actually back then I was in the US. So worked for a couple of companies and learned the ins and outs of HR. Then I moved into what I call my rebel phase. So when I moved over to the UK and I started working in organizations and really just trying to challenge the status quo, push the boundaries, which is what we're going to be talking about today. And then the phase that I'm in right now, I call my pay it forward phase. My job title, which I completely made up, is Chief Pay It Forward Officer. And, doing things like this today, writing my books, all the work that I do, that's where I am now. So that's 20-something years condensed into three short sentences.
Very well done. That's not easy.
Yeah, I didn't think you'd want to hear about all the companies I've worked at, all the work I've done. That could be a bit boring.
So what would you say is your area of expertise then?
It's interesting because I started out focusing on rewards, and I did global and international rewards. And as I've gotten more involved in HR and as I've written more books, it's really expanded into anything people related. My first book was on communications. So it was all the things I had done wrong when I communicated to my employees, and I wanted to put it in a book so other people didn't make those mistakes. Then the book we're going to talk about today is called the Rebel Playbook. So obviously the rebel phase of me. But I've also done work on values. I wrote a book called Bringing Your Values Out to Play. As you said, 2 books on recognition, and then 1 book on leadership. So, who knows what my next book is going to be. I love learning new areas and getting more involved. Each time I write a new book, I learn so much.
Yeah. I mean, that's quite an investment, just spending that time writing those books. You obviously get a lot of joy out of it.
I do, and probably similar to you when you wrote your book is, for me, the magic happens when I talk to other people also. So my most recent book, I think I must have written or spoken to 30 or 40 global thought leaders. So for me, it's like, my way of getting a master's or a doctorate through my research. It's my own form of education. So yeah, I love it. Absolutely love it.
Yeah, super smart, and then sharing with other people.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'll do all the legwork. It's not that I know more than anybody else. I'm just taking the time to talk to people, learn it, and then put it into ways that people can really digest it and do something with it.
Yeah. So, with that in mind, what drew you to this career path?
Yeah, do you know, I completely fell into it, to be completely honest. I was in university back in the States and I was doing competitive gymnastics. And then my final year, I couldn't do gymnastics anymore. So I was bored out of my mind. Most people would then start playing and partying and everything. I was just bored. So I got a part-time job in HR and it was in the rewards function. So who knows, what I would be doing now if I hadn't fallen into that job. Yeah. And I loved it. I started out there and the rest is history.
Okay, so that's a pivot from competitive gymnastics to HR.
You know what? It's funny though because when I do my talks and I do my writing, I bring gymnastics into it a lot. A lot of the things that I learned from gymnastics, and I'm sure other people in sports, same thing. You learn so many powerful lessons when it comes to sports. So, yeah, and I always joke about how like people are like, don't you get nervous, standing in front of people? I've talked in front of crowds, 1,000, 2,000 people. And I always say, if I could stand on a balance beam, which is 4 inches wide, in front of people in a gymnastics leotard, I can stand in front of thousands of people. That's easy.
Brilliant. So, what is it? Why do you love this area so much?
Yeah, I'm driven by making a difference. And I think a lot of people can say that about the work that they do, making a difference. And for me, when it comes to HR and people, I mean, you can make a profound impact on the lives of people, both at work and at home, because we all know that it's not like you can just walk out of the door at the end of the day and not bring your feelings and emotions with you. And I just love being able to make those differences. And it's lovely because I still run into people. I remember running into somebody couple months ago who told me how I had made such a difference on her life because I think she said I bullied her into joining the pension scheme. I don't remember being a bully, but she's like, you're not leaving my office until you sign up for the pension scheme. And she was like 21 years old. And she said, 15 years later, I'm so glad that you did that to me. Or somebody else where I might have put in a leadership training program. And it's like, yeah, I'm making a difference. I can be proud of the work that myself and my amazing teams have done.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. All about the people,
Absolutely.
having that impact. It's amazing. So I kind of want to move into the sort of core skills and kind of pillars and knowledge areas of why you work and where you work and how you work. I did a podcast last week or a couple of weeks ago, and the sentence, the employee experience should be just as strong as the customer experience, like really resonated with me, which is why I kind of ended up knocking on your door. So with that in mind, what are the sort of core skills that you harness, that you rely on in order to kind of focus on this employee experience area?
I think the first one is curiosity. I always joke and said I should have been a detective because I love going in and picking things apart and exploring them. And I think that you need to do that because the employee experience, and I know we'll get into it later, is so different for each person. And you need to understand that. You need to be curious about it. You can't make assumptions and just make generic statements and such. So I think curiosity is so, so important. And related to that one is creativity. So not being afraid to try new things, do things that are unique to your business, your culture, your values, your mission, your people, all of those types of things. And it's interesting because my company, there's only two of us, but we still have company values because I'm a big believer you need company values. Curiosity relates to my first company values, which is open the door to possibilities. So, don't walk into a situation and say, we can't do it. Because I think in HR we do that quite often. No, we can't do it. We don't have the technology. We don't have the time. So I think that mindset. And then the creativity one, my other value is create magic. And always try to think about how can you create magic, even if it's something really dull and boring. How can you make it something that the employee experience and your people will benefit from? So those are my two big ones, I would say.
Ooh, okay, so the make magic one, especially, that's kind of sparkly. That's an
It
interesting.
is. Yeah, And it's interesting because I had someone design my values, and she's absolutely wonderful, and she created like magic wands and stars and everything in the visual of it, just to make that point.
But how do you actually unpack that? So I'm not a magician. I think I quite enjoy the metaphor of making magic, but actually what's behind that? What sits behind that? How do you unpack making magic?
Yeah, I mean, to me, making magic goes back to that idea of making a difference. You want someone's reaction to be, wow, that's amazing. That's fantastic. So I'll give you a perfect example. At one of my companies, we were looking at well-being. What can we do to support our employees when it comes to well-being? And I had that mantra of how can we make it magical? And we ended up doing something. It doesn't have to be fancy sometimes. We gave the magician's wand to our employees, and we gave everybody an allowance, and we're like, you create your own magic. You decide what's the best way to use this benefit. I'm not going to tell you that you have to use it only on a gym, for example. You can, I mean, some of the strangest things people used it for. I think I used it for the trapeze that you hang from the sea, a flying trapeze type of thing. Somebody else used it to buy like this really healthy drinks that they could start every morning with. So yeah, sometimes you don't have to create the magic. You can pass it over to your employees so that they can do it themselves.
But allowing them the autonomy to do so.
Yes, yeah.
So that's an exercise in trust as well then, right?
Absolutely. And it's interesting because when I was interviewing companies, when I was writing my book, some people did the well-being allowance, for example, but they only let people choose maybe 10 things, which is better than a lot of companies. But we took a step back and said, you know what? We trust our employees. We're going to spend a lot of time explaining what it's used for, so people don't go and like pay bills for it, because that's not necessarily the intent of it. But at the end of the day, we're going to trust our employees. And it's a hard thing to do, especially because if I think about, as I said, I've been doing it for a very long time. I do think that a lot of our HR programs and other business programs are built off of the concept of mistrust. As a matter of fact, in our book, we say that too often we design things for the 5% of people who are going to abuse the program, as opposed to the 95% of people who are going to use it the right way. And I always challenge myself with that and say, okay, who are you really designing it for?
Yeah, that's really interesting. So did the organisation learn from what people had spent their bucks on, or it was just a happy collective exercise?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a very analytical person. So, of course, I told people that I want to see what you're using it for, more for myself than for anyone else. But yeah, it was really interesting, some of the key themes. And the other reason I did it also is some people just didn't know what to use the money for. So I thought the more that we could do it. As a matter of fact, when we launched the program, I had a group of people throughout the company. It was a global company. I had a bunch of people on my project team. And to launch it each day, we released a video of each of them saying how they were going to use it, just to inspire people and get excited and sprinkle a little magic dust. And it was absolutely brilliant. And again, it was a different way to do it. Normally you just send somebody like, here are 3 things that you can use it for. But we thought we'd have a bit of fun. We even did it sort of like as an advent calendar. So each day you'd open a different virtual door and there would be that video. So yeah, I love it. I can't take credit for that campaign. My team absolutely came up with it, and I loved it.
But again, you've given the autonomy. You've allowed the creative license to sit elsewhere, because that's fantastic. So the user generated content, actually seeing your colleagues across the organisation and what they're doing with just really helps inspire. That's a fantastic story. It's kind of, my brain was going off to the homeless problem. So people quite often say, "Oh, I won't give money to homeless people because they'll spend it on X." Like, actually, that's kind of none of your business. If you're thinking like you want to do something helpful, like you can't build it for the odd homeless person that may go and spend it on whatever you do or don't approve of. You've got to be generous and trusting, and you're there to help, right?
Yeah, I mean, also, and sort of related to that and the employee experience, you need to listen to them. And I say that because as you were saying that, it reminded me, I had worked for a company for 6 months in London, and I would stay in London. They put me up in a hotel 3 nights a week, and I would walk by this homeless person all the time, and we got talking about it, and I ended up giving them my breakfast box every morning. So at the hotel, they'd give me a breakfast box. And in talking to them, they're like, I just get so hungry in the morning. And by the time people give me money, and so I thought, what, the best thing to do was to give them my breakfast box. And I felt so guilty when my 6 months ended because this poor person had gotten used to, breakfast 3 times a week from
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
So yeah, but that was through listening. And again, going back to employee experience, you have to listen to your people to understand what's going to be best for them.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, great stories in there. So what are the hard to things do around this kind of building this employee experience? And if they're not solved, what can fail, but what could succeed?
I think the hardest thing is that too often we just continue doing the things that we've been doing for years and years and years. We have certain benefit programs, certain training programs, certain onboarding processes, the entire employee experience, mapping it all out. And I think that, if you look at employee engagement surveys, the numbers are not changing. As a matter of fact, the most recent Gallup, they went down again. And that's why we wrote the Rebel Playbook, because we want to challenge people. And all the work that I do is to step away, challenge yourself, and think about, is it still working? Our people are different than 20 years ago. We've got different generations, different world. So it's really about challenging your thought process and thinking, is it going to work? Listening to your people and not being afraid, again, as we said earlier, to try different things. Change is never going to happen if we keep doing the same thing. What was that quote about,
Everybody.
there's some quote about, you don't learn anything if you do the same thing over and over again. And how Einstein made 1,000 mistakes or something before he got it right, type of thing. So, yeah. And I do that sometimes. Yeah, I do that sometimes with my employees. I'll say, I'm going to try this. I'm going to be honest with you. If it doesn't achieve our objectives in 6 months, when I review it, we're going to change it again. And, treating our employees like adults, they can handle that. They don't mind if you tell them the truth. They'll get on board with it.
Yeah. Just going back to that Gallup report. So you said, just so our listeners understand what you meant, just want to dig into that. You said that the employee engagement has dropped. Could you just sort of quantify that a little bit more for me?
Yeah, so they do a global survey every year. And I think the most recent was 21% and the UK was 10%.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
picturing it this way, any sport that you play, say there's 13 people on a sports team. If you only have in the UK 10% who are engaged, that means you only have 10% of 13. I should have picked an even number. You have one and a half people. No, 23% is, let's say 5 people. 5 out of your 13 people are actually engaged. And the other people are not chasing after the ball. They're not throwing the ball, whatever sport metaphor you want to do. So it is a big problem. And they're disengaged, but they also, I don't know if it's Gallup or someone else, explain it as you've got engaged, disengaged, and actively disengaged.
Yeah.
So, and there's a great, I think it's a cartoon on this one, where the engaged people are rowing a boat. The disengaged people are just sitting there doing nothing. And the actively disengaged are throwing water in the boat and poking holes in it to try to sink the boat. So yeah, you don't want either of those last 2 groups of people in your company.
Yeah, again, that's a great metaphor. And by disengage, we mean people that are not engaging with their actual work, with their job. And that spans a whole raft of things, right? That's not just a cultural thing, or predominantly starts there, but it means that they're, for whatever reason, just not doing their day to day. And if their day to day is 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, that's kind of like just even financially, the brain goes, how much is that worth to individual organisations, let alone the economy?
Yeah, and any book I wrote, I always start with the why. Why is it important? And to your point, when I do talks and I do workshops and such on engagement, that's the first hurdle I have to get over, because, a lot of business leaders have not really thought of it that way. They haven't, as you said, realized the difference it can make from a positive or negative perspective. And you only have to think about yourself. Think about when you're engaged, when you're really, it's not just being happy, because I don't think engagement is just being happy. I think that's one aspect. But an engaged person understands what the company is trying to do. They understand what part, and they're going to go out of their way to do whatever it takes to make it happen. And just think about how much more powerful and how much more of an impact you made when you were engaged. And I think it a lot can change if people just start thinking and focusing on that why, and then they put their attention into it.
Yeah. Okay, so starting to just unpack that a bit. So just identifying how engaged your own workforce is as a leader. How hard is that to try and achieve?
Yeah, I mean, there's surveys. So I'm a big believer in doing a survey. A lot of companies do annual surveys, but that's not enough. I don't think that's enough because it's a point in time. And again, just think of yourself. You could be filling out a survey on a day where you're feeling either great or you're feeling rubbish, and it could absolutely skew it. More companies are doing more pulse surveys, so more on the spot surveys, which I think is great. But I'm also a big believer of just getting out there and talking to your people and seeing and hearing what they have to say, but also, seeing how they react to things. That's a measure of engagement. So, if you're planning an event and only 2 people show up, something's wrong. Talk to people about why it's not working. Or you launch a new program and only 20% of people actually sign up for it. What's wrong with that? So I think it's just looking for data in lots of different ways and not relying on just one piece of information.
Yeah. And then how do you move towards, obviously there's then this sort of specific identification of solution, but you're taking a measure, you're taking the health checks of the organisation and the people, and you're having various data points come in. What do you then kind of suggest that is done about it? What would the leadership team, what questions should they be asking of themselves and the organisation in order to take this forward?
Yeah, well, I'm a big believer in giving people tools and models. So all of my books have models, just because I think the world is just sometimes so vague that you need a bit of structure. So we developed something called the Employee Engagement Bridge. And the idea of it is to think about what are the different things, if you think about a bridge, that connects your employee with the company. So I think as a leader, once you understand, what's going on and you talk to them about what's going on, then you put it into different categories. So for example, in the bridge, there's 10 elements. So things like purpose, mission, and values. Are your purpose, mission, and values achieving what your people need? Do your people understand what the purpose, mission, and values are? Do they understand what they need to do to live them, to own them, those types of things? Another element of the bridge is leadership and management. So are your management practices things that are driving engagement or driving disengagement? Are your leaders owning it? Because there's a study that said that there's a 70% variance in employee engagement solely based off of leaders. And I know you wrote a book on leadership. I wrote a book on leadership. So I'm sure you're not surprised about that. So I think the next step then is to look at all the different elements and unpack them individually and see where are the areas that I can make the biggest difference.
Yeah. It's a lot of pressure on people, isn't it? On leaders, on teams.
It is. It's not an easy job. Absolutely.
Do you actually know what it's worth to keep your best people energized and aligned? Like not just retained, actually excited about what they do and where the company is going. So top performers leave through various different reasons: lack of clarity, strategy that can feel disconnected from the reality, and the frustration of working in silos whilst opportunities slip by. They want to be a part of something that's actually working. And this is where Zockery helps those leadership teams. We can create momentum. We can help develop a strategy that's credible and compelling. We use workshops that give your team a voice in shaping direction, and we help AI that can accelerate validation. We translate it into executable OKRs with cross-functional collaboration and fast learning loops that let great people do their best work. So in a few quarters, you're not just retaining talent, you're becoming the place where people want to build their career. That's Zockery, strategy that moves.
So what are the misconceptions around this?
About employee engagement.
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest ones is that there's one way of doing it. Going back to I said there's not one way of doing a survey. There's one way of doing it. So, For example, one of the engagement bridge elements is communications. So you go out and you communicate to your people one way, and you think everybody's going to know what's going on. They're going to be excited. They're going to be engaged. And there isn't. There's so many different ways. Again, we've got 5 generations in the workplace. We've got how many cultures? Most companies have different cultures, different backgrounds. So it's not just ages, but there's so many variances. So I think that's one of the biggest problems, is that you think it's a one and done. Whereas yes, it takes more work, but it's looking at all the different ways that you can do it. So for example, I talked about that well-being launch. One way we launched it was through an advent calendar. Some people thought that was really fun. Other people, their personality would want something all in writing. Another group of people wanted to talk about it. So we had, town halls and we talked about it. So it's trying to understand, how can you meet the needs of all of your diverse people?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's really interesting. So starting to sort of think about going over the horizon, but it seems every day is changing, and we had some interesting discussions about this last time we spoke. What would you say is the most pressing challenge that you're seeing in your market right now?
I think when it comes to employee engagement and employee experience, I think it's just the needs are changing more quickly than a lot of companies are having time to adapt to. If you think about all that people have been through over the last 5 years, all that
Right.
businesses have gone through over the last 5 years, it's trying to keep up with the change and make sure that you're giving your people what you need. So, for example, leadership, and you see this as a coach. How can you help your leaders be effective in this new world that we're in right now? Whether it's AI or people working remotely or having global. So it's really keeping up with the pace. And I think that, I am a perfectionist, so I can say this. A lot of us think that you can't do something until it's perfect, and it's been slowing us down. And we just need to just get out there and try. And we said earlier, try different things, talk to our people, and just try to keep up with the pace as much as possible.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So if you had 15 minutes with a business leader, with a CEO, perhaps, obviously the podcast is about growth and growth catalysts. What would you sort of spend that 10, 15 minutes on? What would you suggest or recommend to that leader that they could go away, consider, or even go away and implement or learn more about to really help their people?
Yeah, I mean, it begins with whether or not the CEO buys into it. So I might end up using the entire 15 minutes convincing them, as we talked about, why employee engagement is important. But let's assume that the CEO buys into it and wants to know what to do. And in that situation, what I would work with them on is understanding the employee engagement bridge, the employee engagement spirit, the employee experience, and really just helping them understand what they need to go back and do to map out, this is where we are right now. Almost a SWOT analysis. This is where we are right now. This is where we need to get to be, and then map out a plan on what they can do. I'm a big believer that you can only do so much at a time. So it's trying to help them understand how you're going to figure out which are the most important priorities. So, for example, in your last survey, where did leaders score really, really low? Then what can we do to support your leaders? Or did people say that they don't feel appreciated? So can we put in an appreciation program? So I think the importance is understanding the why and the what, and then jump into the how with them.
Okay.
But just get them excited about it. To me, if you only had 15 minutes, it's to get them so excited that you can have more conversations with them.
Yeah. So if that leader then gets all excited and says, right, okay, we need to sort of deal with this as a leadership team. Mm-hmm. Who should be in that room? Obviously, that's very specific to very specific organisations, but that, the CEO could go off and say, right, I need to get the leadership together. I'm going to ask them a bunch of questions so that we can find a starting point. Who would you recommend that we speak to?
Yeah, absolutely. Because you want to get the rest of the leadership team on board. You don't want to have somebody who's pulling going back to disengagement. So you would almost have that same conversation, but you would have it led by the CEO. So the CEO takes their excitement, they talk about the business and the people, and get them a part of the journey, and then figure out how you're going to work together. Because the problem is it can't just be the leadership team. There's this model called the Iceberg of Ignorance. I think it's been around since like 1979. And it just talks about, if you picture an iceberg, all of the problems are known at the bottom. 100% of the problems in the organization are known at the bottom. But unfortunately, only like 8% trickle up to the top. So what are you going to do in your organization to understand the icebergs? Whether that's through focus groups, whether that's, depending on the culture, I love to be able to do that myself in a company. But if the culture is not right, do you need to bring someone like you in or somebody like that to come in and have those conversations? Because you want to understand what's really going on. And at the same time, suck all those great ideas out of them. I had a boss once who I remember, I remember they said to me that I couldn't go out and talk to my employees because he hired me as the expert and I had all the ideas. And I was so glad to leave that company because, yes, I've got ideas, but to me, it's the culmination of everyone together that are the great ideas. So, yeah, how can you get your people involved as well?
Wow, what a reflection that must have been. So that person was saying to you, well, you know best, so you crack on and don't listen to anybody else. What a great example of a fixed mindset.
Oh, my, I mean, and he said to me, he said, that's what I pay you for. Do you know what the thing is and if you talk about it in your book, um, a lot of us, a lot of who we are is shaped by the past. And it took me a while to shake that off because I kept
Yeah.
hearing him in my ear saying, you're the expert. That's what I pay you for. And I would almost feel guilty going out and talking to my employees. So once I like got him off my shoulder and out of my ear, the world has been a better place. But it's how do you move away from people like that who have had a negative impact on us?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So is there one quick win that most organizations could implement now?
I'd say two quick wins.
Ooh,
I'll probably say more than two as I say it. First of all, understand where you are now.
yeah.
You can't do anything until you understand where you are. The next is to be a rebel. So anytime I do a talk, I always, and sometimes I put on my rebel cape even. I'm like, be a rebel. Don't be afraid to try things. What's the worst that's going to happen? And then the last one is to do it in your own way. So, for example, in my book, The Rebel Playbook, we've got 60 stories of what companies have done just to show that there's no one way of doing it. And that's what I love working with companies to be really, really unique. My book on recognition, for example, one of my favorite examples is there was an airline in India, and the way that they would reward people or recognize people for their quarterly awards is they put your face on the airplane. They made like a sticker out of your face and they put it on the airplane. I mean, that is so unique. Nobody else could do something like that. I was working with a company in Australia, and they're a shoe company, and their shoes have like names. I'm like, you could name a shoe after a person. So I love to challenge people to do something that is unique to them, that makes a difference, but is something, again, it creates magic. So yeah,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
know what's going on, be brave, be a rebel, and do something your own way.
Yeah. Yeah, those stories really, yeah, now I can start to see the magic. Like, yeah, and have a shoe, put your face on a plane. That is really fun and unique and actually something to aspire to.
Absolutely. And it doesn't have to cost, I mean, that probably cost hardly anything. Another company I interviewed, they had a Star of the Year program. This is for my recognition book also. And one of the prizes that they gave you at the awards ceremony was they named a star after you, which I love because it doesn't cost that much. I looked it up. And every time you look in the sky, you just remember how much people appreciated you at your company. So again,
Yeah.
it doesn't have to cost a lot of money, but it's unique.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah, really great ideas there. So, sort of back to the over the horizon now. So, in the next 12 months. So, I'm not asking anybody for their predictions. You might have a magic wand, but I'm not sure your crystal ball works. So, for the next 12 months,
Not today, yesterday maybe, but yeah.
what would you suggest that our listeners, our business leaders, should prepare for in the next 12 months?
Continual change. I think life is just a roller coaster these days. So yeah, we have to be prepared for change, open for change, looking for change. So going back to the idea of listeners, listening for change.
Yeah.
Yeah, you need to be out there listening to your people, hearing what they have to say. If you're a CEO, listen to give that responsibility to the rest of the people sitting around the table
Yeah.
to do. Yeah, don't have that iceberg.
Yeah. Do you call it the idiot iceberg?
The, the iceberg of ignorance.
Ignorance, that was it.
Yeah, it is a great model.
It's brilliant. Just triggers the right imagery immediately.
It does. And do you know what? One of the stories that I always share about how if you listen to your people at all levels, the best ideas happened. I worked for a company that had theme parks, and we had a listening program. We actually had a great idea program, which I think is so wonderful. I don't even think we gave money. We just gave them the idea of you knew you had a great idea. And this one employee, I think he was like 16 years old, and he was the one who was standing on the rides, letting the parents and the kids in. And he saw the frustration day in and day out of the parents. By the time they got to the front of the line, they were like so flustered because they had to entertain their kids for an hour. So it was his idea to do something in the queue, and it was at a Legoland, and he set up a table with Lego, and the kids could go play while their parents stood in line, and it was close enough that it was safe. And as a CEO, as a head of HR, there's no way I ever would have thought of that idea, and it's just such a great, just a great visual of how ideas come from everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah. Brilliant. As we talked about, so I'm trying to look for anecdotes of good, bad kind of bosses. I know you've written similar books. So everyone I speak to, everyone goes, "Oh yeah, there was this one person that did this terrible thing." That's easy. Actually, I'd love to hear the other side of that coin. Is there someone that had such an impact that said something or did something in a moment that had a really prolific or profound effect on the rest of your professional career?
So it's interesting because I always, when I do talks, I do my bad boss story and my good boss story. So I'm so happy that you asked for the good boss story, because it's interesting when we were researching for our book and we asked people for stories. We had so many bad boss stories and hardly anybody sent us good boss stories, which is really sad because I'm sure it happened, but people don't remember it. But to answer your question, I had a boss, I'm going to say his name, Tony Coleman. And I was working for a retail company in the US, and I saw a job in London. And I decided to apply for it because I'm a competitive person. I didn't have all the skills. Like I had only been doing like one part of HR, and it was for more parts of HR. And I had only done US HR, and it was for, at the time, it was European HR. But I applied for it. I thought, the heck, I'm going to give it a go. And this person, this who would be my boss, took a chance on me. He must have seen something in me and said, you know what? I know she hasn't done it all, but I'm going to move her. I mean, he didn't just take a chance on me. He moved me from the US to the UK. I just got married, so my husband came with me as well. And he profoundly changed my entire life. My life would not be the same if it wasn't for him. And again, I just, every once in a while I'll go out and tag him and say something because, he needs to know the difference that he made in my life.
Yeah. Yeah, that's wonderful. Well, hopefully we can tag him on this.
Yes.
So
Even though it's probably a pain, Tony. I know I wasn't perfect, so.
Oh, that's lovely. What an impactful thing. That's amazing.
But what an honor as a leader to know that you can do that. And I challenge leaders all the time. It just gives me a warm feeling when I think of him. And isn't that what you want from your people, that you've been able to make a difference? It doesn't have to be as big as moving somebody from one country to another. There's lots of examples I have of bosses who have done things that have been so impactful to my life. We don't have enough time. But yeah, it doesn't have to be big. Even the little day-to-day things can make such a huge difference in someone's life.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Is there anything that I should have asked you that you would have liked to have said?
I guess the only thing, and I did really talk about it when we were talking about the employee experience, is to look at it holistically. A lot of times people go in with like a plaster, a Band-Aid, whatever you call it, and they fix one little problem. And there's often a ripple effect. So they think that, okay, I'm going to put in a new recognition program because people aren't happy. But actually, are there other things that are leading to it, or other things that could fall out? So to look at the employee experience holistically, as you do in business. As business leaders, you look at things end to end, and you need to do that from an employee experience. I mean, that's why we came up with the whole engagement bridge, to try to help people understand some of the pieces of the puzzle that they need to put together.
Yeah, yeah, you're quite right. Actually, I was talking with one of the co-founders of Zocri. We're talking about HR just being much more, or being used in a much more strategic fashion. It's usually bringing in these amazing people that have got all sorts of experiences, and they just kind of end up doing the admin and the exit interviews and the annual conversation, people asking for a pay rise. It's kind of all too late when you've got to that stage of the conversation, right?
Yeah. I mean, even I remember doing an exit interview with someone at the end of their first week. And he said that the reason he decided to leave was because on his first day, he was given a desk, no pencils, paper, computer, anything, just a blank desk. And he said, this is how they made me feel on day one. How am I going to be a year from now? So you're right. I mean, just the little things that can make such a big difference. I tried to convince them, but I think once you make up your mind,
Yeah,
yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
So think about, to your point, those first moments, even if it's just during the interview process. How have you made them feel? I stepped out of an interview process with a very big global company because I didn't like how they made me feel during the interview process. They canceled last minute an interview, which is fine, and never came back and apologized. And I thought, I don't want to work for you. Sorry.
Well, you read a lot of that over LinkedIn at the moment. Obviously, the job market's shifting quite significantly. So it seems to be just a lot of shape shifting going on, and I see tons of horror stories about people having multiple interviews inside these organisations and getting no feedback, or never receiving any sort of contact at all. These are not positive signs of good organisations, are they?
No, and it's interesting because when we wrote our book, and I wrote my Rebel Playbook with another amazing boss I had. He was my CEO, and I worked for him. And we gave the book to his mother to read before it was published. And she looked at it and she goes, "Isn't that what I taught you as a child? Aren't all these things that you're saying?" And I think it's really important because we talk about AI, we talk about technology, but at the end of the day, as business leaders, it's the basics. Thank someone if they've done an interview. Apologize if you've done. I mean, like, you don't need AI to tell you those types of things. So I think to some extent, if we can just get back to basics as businesses and leaders, we can make a profound difference in the lives and ultimately in the success of our businesses.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, it's all innately human, isn't it? Absolutely. Just remember there's human beings here at the end of the day, and just treat as you want to be treated.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, Deborah, thank you so much for sparing me the time this morning. I'm so delighted that you agreed to guest. Obviously, we'll make sure that we've got the right contact details. So if people want to track down your books, they're able to do so. We'll do all of that in there. Yeah, it's an absolute delight to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it. We could have talked for hours on the employee experience. Maybe another time.
Definitely.